All right, welcome in everybody. This is Ethan, and I am sitting here with Jeremy Summers, a friend of mine from the Trends Group, a fascinating founder in his own right. We'll get into some of the backstory there in a second. Currently building a company called Not Content, which is this is the first example of this that I have seen so far. An agency that is really leveraging the new AI tools we've been talking about so much on this podcast. So I saw it. It's incredible. I wanted to bring Jeremy on here to talk a little bit about what he's building and how some of the AI content gen stuff is really changing the face of the agency world, the creative world, stuff like that. So Jeremy, welcome in, man.
Hey, great to be here. Ethan, the only thing that I'll say to you is like, most of my businesses are like a play on words for the names and the titles. So I call it Not Content. But
I like that.
The purpose is that you should read it as not content either. Like it reads as you want to read it. So we created it as Not Content because none of us should ever be content with what we're creating. But it's also read as not content, and not content.
That actually explains a lot, because one of the things that I didn't quite grasp about this company when I first saw it, and I was reading it as not content, is it is a pretty content heavy company.
It's a content agency.
Yeah, literally the promise is like, we can double your content output every single month. Is it without even raising your costs, right? So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like it's content from the drop. And I was like, I don't know where he's going with his name, but that definitely helps explain some things. So thanks for clearing that up. But yeah, man. Okay, so I'm so interested to have you in here. I think sometimes we do like a screen share component to these shows, and I might kick this off with like a brief screen share. But as we do, all right, maybe before we even get into Not Content, can you just give people a little bit on your background? Because you've been in the creative world in different ways for a long time. Obviously, we've connected before about your history in fashion, which was really interesting. So can you just give people like a 30,000 foot view of what your career has looked like so far and what led to this idea?
Yeah. So as you say, I'm a career creative. Since I was, in my early teens, I started with, my first foray into image making, which was back then photography, shooting film. There was no such thing as digital. I'm not that old, but it wasn't that long ago. And really started out in photography. And when I finished high school, I went to university in Sydney for commercial photography. And that took a couple of years, finished that, decided that was not what I wanted to do at all. I didn't want to be stuck in a studio all day. And then sort of went in, I already had my business set up and was doing a bunch of freelance and taught myself design and graphic design. And from there went into some of the very first digital agencies in Australia and sort of cut my teeth there, working my way through the ranks to, getting to art director and I guess creative director status. And during that time, started my fashion business, which then just sort of took off. And that became the next, I guess, decade and a little bit of my life in flying around the world, going to beautiful islands and photographing women in swimwear. And that was going to runway shows. And that was like my life for like 10 years. And then coming out of that and going sort of back into, I guess, sort of more creative agency world and finding my, I guess, creative spark again and producing a little brand agency that was brand and design. And we have a brand incubator sort of arm of it, and realizing coming out of that and pivoting into something new after sort of 12 or 13 years, there was a lot of questions about like, what do we not want to do? And so most of the businesses, it's my wife and I. And so we really had a lot of talking about what do we not want to do? Like what was an issue in the last 10 years? And like staff, we don't want to deal with staff anymore, and offices and all this sort of stuff. So that's where we are. And then this last year, like a lot of other people have been diving into AI. And from, the very first time I saw anything related to DALL-E, I just could see the future of it and what it would mean to people who are creatives and image makers. And obviously it's come a long way even in the last couple of months. And the big thing that I really realized about this entire AI movement, both in terms of visual and it'll it applies to what'll be all the audio and music and video and like any of the creative outputs from the tools will be that like you must have a human creative brain if you want really good output. We can get really great today we can get beautiful imagery in any sort of style on the planet. But if you don't have, for an actual brand or an actual creative agency or anything which requires like connection with your either customer, your audience, or whatever it happens to be, it's going to require a creative human brain. And so that's sort of where Not Content sprung from. And as you alluded to, we're a creative agency, but we figured out a way using the AI tools to double or triple or 10x your output, we'll call it creative output, in like 90% less time. And we're trying to do it without having to raise your budget, because going to clients and saying, cool, look, we have this new tech and we can do all of these things for you, but we need extra money, is a really hard sell. So we want to be able to take people's current budgets without stretching them, but double or triple their output, as well as reduce their timelines by a huge amount, and also give them access to anything that they could possibly think of to create. And where our philosophy around the AI tools comes in is that we've established a roster of like career creative directors. So anyone can now have access to a creative brain that is, at a Nike or an Apple level without having to pay an agency hundreds of thousands of dollars for that. And we figured out a way with our model to separate our creative brains from the actual usage of the tools, so that if even a small brand comes on, they'll get access for a little while to the brain and the beauty of the creativity of these people. And then we move it across to an output stage and can output everything from there. So we've really figured out how to like provide a bunch of services that most brands and people who need creative services don't have the money or time or connections to access to. If that makes sense.
There's so much that's fascinating about this particular take on the use of AI, and I want to get into it in a second. There's also a lot of really interesting implications of it. But for people listening too, I just want to give two other small pieces of context for anybody who may not know. So that was a great background. Also somewhat humble, I think, because you've been on the leading edge of several different trends throughout the course of your career and had done just incredibly influential work. So that first swimwear agency, obviously we've had a conversation. Indulge me in like hyperbole a little bit, but you guys basically brought back the One Piece and
yes,
like Victoria's Secret. Yeah, I remember a conversation we had where you said you were literally in Victoria's Secret headquarters and they had your guys' design pinned up inside their cubicles. So leading edge on that trend. Then newsletter space. A lot of people probably don't know this, but this is the guy behind the Milk Roads design, layout, character. So if you know Sean and his work, that whole like Milk Road dude is Jeremy's work. So just I've always kind of admired you since we met for your ability to play a hand in like incredibly popular things without necessarily calling attention to yourself. It's like the work that's always stood forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's a very Australian thing to do. We don't really celebrate our successes, or we consider them successes, but we like move on to the next thing at work, and we don't like to talk. And when we moved to LA, that was something that we really had to get over, was like, how do you talk about that stuff? And so I always just sort of skip over it. But yes, if I'm to put my Australianness aside for a second, yes, we built something in the swimwear industry and changed the entire industry in a bunch of different ways over the next 10 years. Yes, we brought back the One Piece, and we pioneered the application of digital printing technology into swim, which is now used by every swim company on the planet. We produced an aesthetic that was copied consistently, and we ended up in a whole bunch of legal battles and all sorts of things. And yes, for everyone from Victoria's Secret to Net-a-Porter to most swimwear brands on the planet had our images on their mood boards, and we sold in 40 plus countries. And our sort of biggest fans we count as Beyonce and Rihanna, and like all of the things really. So yes, if I put my Australians aside, that's what we do.
Oh, I forgot to mention Beyonce and Rihanna and
so yeah, that was pretty big. And I've always sort of tried to pride myself on using your creative brain and the output of creativity in a way in which maybe it hasn't been used before. I love doing things that haven't been done before, or at least, at scale. And you and I have talked to, a bunch of things, and the stuff that I've done with Trends Group from the beginning, and we sort of keep doing things which you want to talk about in the newsletter and stuff. It's how do we use our creative brains to sort of affect change in different industries or in different ways, or using platforms. We did this. I think the last thing we spoke about, I did this Instagram thing where I was like, I think I could get in touch with anyone almost on the planet who I wanted to get in touch with, but I'm going to use Instagram as a weird sort of tool to be able to do that, and create an account just for this person, and then tag their coworkers and friends, and it worked. Within minutes I was talking to in the DMs of CEOs and whoever I sort of wanted to. So yes, I appreciate you mentioning that. And I also like thinking, okay, cool, hang on, there's a podcast and people are listening and they have no idea who I am. That's a good scene setter. Thank you.
You said something else that was interesting too. So to bring it back to the AI thing, you said that when you first saw, I think it was DALL-E 2, you instantly saw the implications for what that meant for the creative world. Did you struggle with that at all? Because I know a lot of people who are listening to this, myself included, I'm creative for a living, see some of these AI tools, and there is a moment where when you first see it, the first thought that you have is like, is this going to take my job? Mm-hmm. And then you kind of, like, I think a lot of people kind of dig into it, and then that thought slowly evolves to become more nuanced. And it's like, well, maybe it's not going to take my job, but I know a lot of creatives who have opinions about the quality of the work that the AIs are doing, or the role that they should play versus the role that they will play, that kind of thing. Did you ever struggle with the role that this was going to play in the agency world before implementing it the way that you guys have at Not Content?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anything that is sort of threatening to us, we tend to feel protective over it, but I also correlate protectiveness and defensiveness are the same thing in this sort of period. And it's actually almost like a personal development thing, where I realized that over the course of even if I just think about my career, anytime that I've felt like a bit protective and defensive about a technology or a platform, or sort of judging something, which then goes on to become really big and widely adopted in the way that we do things, that was just a defense mechanism against whatever I'm doing at the time, or whatever it has to be. And a really good first example is when Twitter was invented, which I remember when Twitter was invented, and I was in an agency and all of the agency people were getting on Twitter, and I'm like, who the fuck wants to blog with just 180 words or characters or whatever it was at the time? And I'm like, this is so dumb. I cannot see this. So, I have a history of immediately judging and being defensive about things. And so when this stuff came out, I recognized that. And as I say, it's a personal development thing. I recognized that, and I was like, okay, hang on. What if I was to think about it the other way? And it's still scary to me, because it's getting so, and even with the advent this week of GPT chat and all of these things, I've been using it to be how can I want to see how creative it can be, and use it to aid my creativity and all this sort of thing. I have to believe that we're always going to need people, and we're always going to need creative brains. And if not, we're going to need really good creative operators. So I'm not, super concerned. I know a lot of creatives who are immediately protective and defensive, which I completely understand. But at this stage, this thing is so big that if you do not embrace it, and as quickly as possible, you will get left behind. You will, be out of a job, or you'll lose work. I spoke to an agency owner yesterday who owns one of the biggest agencies in New York, creative agencies, and he said that they've got close to 100 people working on just AI stuff, trying to figure all of this stuff out, not building AI tools, just in the tools and in the weeds every day, and figuring out how they're going to apply it to their clients who are, Nike and Samsung and all these people. So I think that's the big realization for me. I'm lucky that I had that personal development moment early on, but at the moment I'm seeing a lot of pushback from creatives, and mainly because they don't understand it. And even when we send our content out to creatives and creative people who are sort of familiar with AI, the general consensus is they can't get their head around what they're seeing. They can't get their head around what they're seeing on our website, or what I'm actually proposing as a service. And so that's been really interesting, is trying to get traction as we launched, only really a few weeks ago, and people think that it's sort of some sort of magical voodoo, or it can't possibly be right.
Can you talk me through the process a little bit of how you got into the weeds on this? I mean, you said something interesting, which is, look, you need to learn how to incorporate this into your work, or you're going to get left behind.
Mm-hmm.
In your case, that resulted in effectively a new agency. So can you just talk me through that? How did you get oriented in the space, and what ultimately led to this implementation?
Yeah. I mean, I had to learn it essentially from scratch. I was lucky that I was very early in the tools, but the tools were not, now we're getting apps, and we're getting, like web UIs, and we're getting, Discord box and all this sort of stuff. Early on, it was very much like almost deep in code, and I'm not a coder, and I don't understand it at all. And I it was YouTube video after YouTube video after asking people in like tiny Discord servers where there was, like a dozen people trying to experiment with stuff. And I think because I can see the long tail of the effect of what, if what's going to happen is if what I think is going to happen is going to happen, which has already now happened in the last few months, where we can create anything at any point in time. I realized that I need to I mean, first of all, I want to, from I've been a designer my whole life, an image maker. I'm like, this is just nuts. I can type something in and just use my creative brain to output whatever I want. Whether it's, it's not just my style of design or illustration. I can do anything that I actually want. So it's been many months of like just tinkering, learning, watching the new tools, making sure that I'm trying to keep updated with everything that's going on, talking to a lot of people. If you were to start today, it's so much easier to get into, because there's 150 different apps that you can just go to a website and start typing stuff and get out cool imagery. But I also think it was a good rite of passage for me to lead up to this point, to understand exactly what my capabilities, what the limits are, and also like who to go to, where to go, what the technology is doing, where I think we'll be in a month or 2 months or 3 months. So that's sort of how we get to this idea for how we wrangle it into an agency service.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you're talking through that, the question that keeps coming to mind for me is, how does this change the industry when more and more people adopt this? So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. For people listening, be sure to check out the YouTube video, or you can check out notcontent.ai. It's right up there. We'll link to it in the show notes. But there's what I'm showing people here is a case study of a particular brand. This is, how do you pronounce this? Is it Kine or Kin?
Kin Euphorics.
Kin Euphorics. And I'm scrolling the page, and there's just, photo after photo after photo of what you would consider like ad creative or product creative, with Kin's products on all sorts of different backgrounds, all sorts of different settings. And what's really fascinating about this, first of all, it looks fantastic, by the way. There's a couple of things that are fascinating about this. One is that if a lot of other companies if this becomes the de facto of producing.
Sorry, my dog's going to bark for a sec. Thank you.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, actually, it's funny. Mine's dreaming on the couch in the background, so I don't know if it's coming through on the mic, but she's literally barking right now. Yeah, she's great. Like,
mine's just barking at our male woman. Okay.
So the thing that comes to my mind is, okay, it seems like you are able to create an unlimited number of backgrounds, or unlimited number of, let's call it like worlds, to place these products in.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question that comes to my mind is, what happens as more and more agencies take that approach? I think we probably come to this thing that you were saying, where it's like, well, your creative talent is again what helps you to stand out. But I don't know, man, talk me through this. Like, from building out these few case studies, what's your take on how this, first of all, how easy is this to produce? Like, what is the actual tooling behind what you guys are doing here? And how is it going to change the agency space overall?
Okay, so I mean, in terms of tooling, we at the moment use a variety of AI generation tools. We use the big ones that we use are Stable Diffusion and Midjourney. Midjourney is available through Discord and super easy to use as even a novice. And then once we finish with those are the sort of the image creation tools. They give us our initial concepts. We take it out of there, and then we use 3 or 4 different other sort of AI-based tools to get them to, often the images come out and they're not exactly what we want. And, if we're an agency or, we're designers, we're going to want to wrangle them in a certain way. We also need to be able to implement the product if it's a product. So you can see the KinCans and the photography in there. So we use a few other tools where we use them for upscaling. We use them for fixing faces and portraits and that sort of thing. We have a specific tool for that, which is also AI. And then we go into Photoshop, which now has its own suite of AI tools, where we then apply whatever we need to do as designers and creatives to get the image looking how we want it to look and fixing it up and that sort of thing. So the tooling is relatively easy. It's accessible to everyone. And that's a big thing where you were going to have thousands and tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of quote unquote agencies or designers who are AI designers who can produce this image of this like glowy bedroom with clouds, swirling around or whatever it happens to be. Anybody can figure out how to create this stuff, right? The key and the difference to what we're doing is you have to be able to think of this first. Okay. So if your client comes to you and they're coming to you as creatives, they may have a bit of a concept, they may have a mood board, they may have photography styles or illustration styles or illustrators they like, or they'll bring you a Pinterest board or a mood board or something like that. From there, good creative is conceptual. It's not just pretty, right? So it's not just about, does this kin bottle fit into this scene that we've built with cocktail glasses and grapes and the actual ingredients that are in this thing. That's one type of content, but it's also like a type of content that's everyone can do even now, right? Now they can do it in an instant with AI. So it's about concept first, and that's where our stable of creative directors are like really what our agency is about. It's just that we don't need to full-time hire a bunch of world-class creative directors, because the technology allows us to create this stuff really quickly, and we have operators of the technology. We basically give you access to the creative directors who we don't actually have to go and hire. We can have them do it of an evening or as a side gig or whatever it happens to be, because we actually only need at that level. If someone comes to me, I can ideate, half a dozen ideas within an hour or so, based on what I see about your brand. And, like the AI, I can suck up all the information about your brand that exists, and then your ideas for what you want to do for your campaign or for your content for the next month, 2 months, year, whatever it happens to be. And then within an hour or two, be able to at least write down and put together a mood board of the things that I would want to do. From there, that's the creative director's job until we deliver them back what the operators have done. So that's our difference. If a brand wants to get access to Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or Dream Booth or any of 100 other tools and come up with their own concept, they can type that stuff in and pop out something that's relatively good, right? From there, it might not be perfect, right? So they're going to want to have their designer or whatever, they're going to need to implement their product and all that sort of thing. Like there's a whole bunch of design and creative services that aren't going to go away. For brands that want to just do sort of butter on the barrel and get cool imagery out and post it, great. But we're about to be flooded with that from now until forever. It's not going to set anyone apart. And so that's what our whole bet is on, that, yep, that's going to happen. And brands are going to try to do it themselves and do it in-house and teach their people in-house to be able to do this stuff. But I truly believe as a career creative that creative will always be number one, and they will actually always come back, because when everybody's doing it, nothing stands out.
That's fascinating. And I'm glad that you phrased it that way too. My co-host on this show, Tim, has put it simply or similarly in the past. He likens AI to McDonald's as well. And he says, McDonald's didn't get rid of restaurants. It just placed more emphasis, more importance on the high end stuff. And, there will always be some people who are just going to go out and eat McDonald's every day, and that's fine. But it's not like the restaurant industry disappears because of it. which I think is an interesting way to think about it. You've mentioned, I know we're just about time here, so if you got to hop, let me know, but I have one or two other questions if you have a minute.
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay. What are you seeing from the AI output that convinces you that a human is still needed? Like human creativity?
There's a difference between the baseline AI output now, and the tools are only getting better every day. I wanted to, like we are currently, whenever you happen to be listening to this or watching it, we are at the worst point in quality, in quantity, and it's the most inaccessible that it will ever be. Doesn't matter when you're listening to this, if it's today or in a year, it's going to stand true, right? But there's a huge difference between the general baseline quality output of the tools and the tools where you can clearly see creative has come into it, both from a conceptual point of view and then also from a wrangling the tools into what you might want. A lot of it still now is about knowing the taxonomy of what you actually want to output. If you want to output something that has photographic quality to it, you need to know about lenses and angles and lighting and that sort of thing, because that's going to make your prompt and therefore your output 1,000 times better. If you just put in, what are we looking at here? If you just put in fancy bedroom or upscale bedroom with arched windows and sunlight and a bubble in the middle, you're going to get something, but the AI is going to decide what it wants to do. Whereas if you start adding the angle that you might want to see it from, the lens, the type of lighting, and then adding keywords. Here you might add something like ethereal and dreamlike, and then also describing specific things that you want to see. I want to see a bed in a bubble with clouds in it, et cetera, et cetera. Like I want, end of day light with deep shadows. Like if you keep describing this stuff and you have the knowledge of the taxonomy and the vocabulary for this, that's where it's going to separate everyone who can use the tool from people who should be using the tool.
Wow. You know what it really gets me about all these AI projects that I keep seeing? I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and so I keep seeing a bunch of funny prompts, impressive prompts. Mm-hmm. But the thing that gets me more than anything is just the human creativity that's revealed in those prompts. So like one of my favorites, a friend in a Slack channel posted recently, was like, give me 15 names for ice cream, for a flavor of ice cream that includes bananas and chocolate and peanut butter. They should be punny. They should be sort of in the style of Ben and Jerry's, and they should all have the name Benedict Cumberbatch like somehow involved in them. And the AI went ahead and did it, and it did a great job. It really did a great job. But what was so surprising was that even that prompt even came to somebody's mind. I think it says so much about human creativity and the yearning for creating that this is really going to unlock inside of people.
Yeah, it's being able to see your ideas in almost in real time, coming from your brain through your fingertips and then being delivered back to you in a visual form, and a beautiful visual form at that, right? Is going to really scale up what people think they can do and how they approach something like this. We've come from a spot where we're like, okay, cool, a unicorn dressed in a cowboy hat, in a spaceship. Like that's where AI started a few months ago, right? And that's where a lot of people are still going. But the fact that you can do anything is a testament to like a lot of things that people actually want to do are recreate real things, or real things that maybe we've never seen before. There's a series going around of selfies through time, where there's like selfies from cavemen in the Ice Age, and the AI is like, it's a selfie of this caveman and there's like a big mammoth chasing him behind. Like there's really stuff. There's like selfies from when they brought the Trojan horse through the gates, right? And you can describe these certain things because the AI knows history and they know the text and they know the illustrations about it and that sort of thing. So we're now seeing photographic realism from that sort of thing. So it is it's fascinating what people's brains are coming up with.
Well, related to that, there's another aspect of this that I hadn't even thought of. But a friend of mine she's an illustrator for a living, and she does a lot of like product creative work as well. When I showed her this, and the first thing she said was that this is so much more eco-friendly than the old way of doing product creative. Because so right now, for people listening, we're looking at a shot. It's got this kin drink in it, and then there's a whole bunch of bar sort of tools laid out. So we have stirrers and all kinds of stuff. it used to be that if you had this vision in your head, you might have to just go to Amazon and order a bunch of tchotchkes and like lay them out on a colored background that gets used once. And then a lot of this stuff, maybe it gets put in a warehouse, maybe it gets thrown away. But when you think about all of the resources that go into shipping a handful of, stirrers and shakers and glasses that are just the right size and shape for a product shoot, there's a huge environmental toll there that it doesn't seem to exist with the AI. Now, there's plenty of controversy over how eco-friendly like the servers are.
Usages and all of that's the thing. But yeah, I think she's got a really good point for all of that sort of stuff. It's, if that's what you're wanting to create, and it does it, and it's saving. I mean, it's, for someone who is reaping the benefits of the creative, when we're talking, let's talk brands for a minute. It's great for them because we're also reducing the amount of time that something takes, right? Like our estimation is, for us, somewhere between 90 and 98% we reduce your timeline for doing creative. We're all coming from doing everything from shoots in our kitchens to TVC shoots for big brands and that sort of thing. So we know how many people, the resources, how much time everything takes. It's a lot, right? Whereas now we can produce essentially Super Bowl ready quality creative in almost hours, not weeks or months that it takes anyone to do it. And that's really sort of what we're banking on as an agency and as a service.
All right. Last question for you is, what are you excited for next? This is already pretty impressive, but you have a good record of kind of being on the leading edge of different trends. So what mountain are you guys yet to climb when it comes to using this technology creatively?
The thing that the AI is struggling with at the minute is super photorealism, right? It's still having trouble wrangling like perfect output. You can 100% get there, but it takes, we'll call it, a lot of time. And in this sort of way, doing photography, which is obviously where I came from, and my first true creative love, a photo actually takes 1/25th of a second or 1/250th of a second, right? It's like that. And technically anyone can push a button on a camera or on their phone, right? But everything that goes behind it is you. But still, you're taking a photo, it's a real world thing. And the AI hasn't 100% nailed it in a quick way yet. You can still get there, and we 100% get there. And we've just been doing this tequila campaign where we've concepted this friends trip, and they go to Mexico to learn about like tequila, and they go to the agave farm and all that sort of thing. And this is like, we're producing like Polaroids and like all types of photos of this made up trip of this group of friends, right? And it's 100% doable. It's just like at the moment for us, compared to everything else, it's a bit harder. So that's super exciting to me. And then the advent of putting the AI through its paces with animation and video, which it does exist. It's just not at the right stage. By this time next year, my guess is you'll be able to put in into a user-friendly website UI the idea for your feature-length film and who you want to play who and what you want to do, and from a very short sentence, and you'll be able to get a film out of it. That's my guess is for this time next year, if not much sooner than that. It's all moving so quickly, like literally day by day. This is just like every day I wake up, and when I read my newsletters and I look at my sources, I'm just like, holy shit, this is just nuts. Like I have to forget the stuff that I learned last week. And like, okay, cool. There's this and there's this. The beautiful thing to me is that most of it is open source. And so it's not cost prohibitive in any way. The really intense tools at some point, which agencies like us will use, will pay for real premium features and products and that sort of thing. But for anyone who wants to jump in today, whether, you're just creative or brand or you just want to play around with it, you can do it for nothing. And to me, that's a really good part of it. The other thing I realized today is like, I'm so glad that we're not just consistently talking about crypto anymore. Like this is so much more fun.
Yeah, that's true. I gotta say, I think I've mentioned this once before, but the creativity that this really sparks, I've never experienced anything like it. Like I sat down, that was the turning point for me when I stopped being skeptical and really started being optimistic, and I have reservations about certain things. Like we've done a show here about how, brands can get burned by jumping too quick into the written content because some of that's going to be
Mhm.
classified as spam. And I think there's also things you got to do to protect the trust that you've built with your users. Like when you're displaying certain things, obviously there could be a temptation to make it look like a product could do something that it can't do, right? So there's definitely, it can be misused like any other tool. But sitting down with Dolly 2 or some of these like Chat GPT and just playing with it, it's
Mhm.
so fun. And it really does,
Yeah.
I think, provide an on-ramp to creativity that a lot of people may not even realize that they're missing, right? And all of a sudden I think people are going to find themselves wanting to create and having
Yes.
ideas that they never knew they would have had before, because now all of a sudden a lot of the barriers to creating are gone.
Yeah.
So super
I
bullish
also
on
think
it.
that we're all inherently pretty creative. Creativity is a muscle that that needs to be worked on and flexed, but also it gives people the option to do things that they could never do before. And so if you have a creative brain and you can type, you're going to get cool stuff. Obviously super bullish on it.
Well, this is fantastic, man. I want to thank you for coming on here.
Yeah, sure.
If people want to check you out, aside from notcontent.ai, where should they check you out?
Gosh, where else would I send people? Our branding agency is called wearehandsomebrand.com. I'm on Twitter infrequently, but I assume more these days. What's my Twitter handle, Ethan? I think it's just Jeremy J. Summers.
We'll find it. We'll put it in the
If
show
you find it,
notes.
put it in the show notes, please. If people follow me, I promise to be more open and more tweety. Yeah, that's about it. But always happy to talk about AI, always happy to talk about creativity. I will mention that we're doing, come January, I've been setting up with Kristen Trends event to do live walkthrough of one, where are we at with AI today in terms of how can you use it today for your business and your brand, and I think we're going to do some live demos and have some people submit their brands and create some stuff on the fly. So that should be pretty cool too, if that's in the trends community.
Awesome. Cool. Well, for anybody listening to this, if you've ever, I've mentioned Trends on here a couple of times. If you're interested, be sure to check out the show notes. We have the best discount available anywhere on Trends in the show notes for the Copyblogger podcast. So
Highly recommend.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Well, this was a blast. Thanks again for coming in, and I can't wait to keep an eye on what you're doing and see what happens next. To everybody who's listening, thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you next time. Later.
Thank you.